So there's this famous line by Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach where he says that uh, Torah is a commentary on the world, and the world is a commentary on Torah. By which I think he meant that we see new things in Torah, just as people could see new things in any religious text because of our life experience, because of what we see happening in the world in our time. And I thought there was a kind of interesting illustration of this in last week's Torah portion in the book of Exodus, Parshat Bo, which is particularly powerful to read in the age of Donald Trump. It's the story. There's one particular line. It's during the last of the three plagues in Egypt, and Moses and his brother Aaron go to Pharaoh to announce the eighth plague, the plague of locusts. And when Pharaoh still refuses to allow the Israelites to leave, the text says that, quote, Moses turned and left Pharaoh's presence. And the medieval commentator Ibn Ezra interprets this phrase as suggesting that Moses left Pharaoh's presence without Pharaoh's permission, which for an all-powerful ruler like Pharaoh was potentially risked death. There's a bit of a parallel between the line we read in the book of Esther, in which Esther enters the presence of the Persian king without his permission, also an act punishable by death. And this is considered an act of tremendous courage. And it's considered a kind of defiance not only of Pharaoh's tyranny, but of Pharaoh's idolatry. Because in Jewish tradition, the fact that Pharaoh considers himself a god is intimately linked with Pharaoh's tyranny and brutality. And so to suggest that Pharaoh is not all powerful, that Pharaoh doesn't have some kind of divine status, is not only part of a struggle for freedom, but it's actually a rejection of idolatry itself. And Pharaoh becomes a kind of anti-model for Jewish kings in the Hebrew Bible, who are required to write a Sefer Torah, to write a kind of book of law, to show that they are not the law, that the law binds them, and indeed that they are not God. Um, Now, Donald Trump, in his own kind of more modern secular language, also, I think, suggests often that he is a kind of a divine figure, right? He said to the New York Times recently that basically he is bound by no law other than his own sense of morality, kind of warped as that sense is. He also said, in speaking about his first year in office, or in his first year since returning to office, he said, God is very proud, right? So if Donald Trump doesn't explicitly think that he is God, he thinks that he should be bound by no domestic or international law, and that he has some kind of access to the mind of God. And so I think you again see the message of Torah in that this linkage between idolatry and tyranny. There's another interesting moment in Parsha Bo, in after the ninth plague, the plague of darkness, where there's this very surprising line where the Torah says that Moses was much esteemed in the land of Egypt, which might seem very surprising. After all, Moses has defied the leader of Egypt, and is the leader of a slave rebellion, essentially. And yet, near the end, by the ninth of the tenth plague, it says that Moses was much esteemed in the land of Egypt. And I found that very resonant today, thinking about the way in which different people deal with Donald Trump, right? Um, think about figures like J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, right? These people who essentially are on perpetual bended knee towards Donald Trump, right? We know what they actually think of Donald Trump, because like so many other Republican politicians, when they didn't fear Trump so much, they said what they thought of Donald Trump, which is pretty much what most of the rest of us think about Donald Trump, that he's a liar, that he's an idiot, and that he's a would-be tyrant. He's also a rapist and many other and a cheat and many other horrible things. But they knew these things because these things are obvious, right? But now, in order to gain access to power, they act as the most fawning kind of sycophants, right, towards Donald Trump. And so in doing so, they really lose, I think, the respect of even many ultimately in their own party. Maybe those people won't say so because they're afraid too, right? But I think they've really surrendered their self-respect, whether they recognize it or not. Contrast that with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. right? Who at Davos gave a speech that publicly defied Donald Trump, really said things that many other foreign leaders feel but were unwilling to say about what Trump has meant for the destruction of any notion of international law in the world. And you saw that Carney got a standing ovation, that he's gotten widespread admiration, just like Moses had, had the admiration not just of his own people for defying Pharaoh, but kind of very broad admiration for his for his attributes of courage and self-respect. That we see that Carney's courage and self-respect actually wins him many, many admirers across ideological divides and across nations. And I think this is really the model for those of us in the United States, the model of Moses, the model of Carney, which is to not never ever cower, to never ever self-censor, to defy Donald Trump again and again and again, to laugh at him, to ridicule him, to oppose him. In every way we possibly can, in accordance with the rule of law, and also to recognize that people outside the United States, whether they're foreign individuals or indeed foreign leaders like Carney or like the leaders in South Africa who defy Donald Trump, if they're defying Donald Trump in the name of human dignity and the name of the rule of law, they are our allies, even though we are in foreign countries, and that it is not anti-American to try to work with foreign governments in order to oppose the tyrannical and destructive policies of Donald Trump any more than it was anti-South African for South Africans to ask countries to oppose apartheid, or that it is anti-Russian when Russian dissidents asked foreign countries to oppose the war in Ukraine, or that it is anti-Iranian when Iranian dissidents ask other countries to denounce their theocratic regime. That there is actually the best understanding, the best definition of what it means to be truly American, to be a patriotic American, is actually to stand up for America's best traditions of human freedom and of the rule of law, and to do so in alliance with anyone in our own country, anywhere around the world who also cherishes those values. I think that's what we see people doing on the streets of Minnesota right now, and their struggle is really a model for those of us all around the nation. And that this struggle, I think the lesson of this week's Torah portion is that this struggle, this model of courage, is not only essential for in struggles for freedom. They are essential to self-respect. That what is on the line in the way that we respond to Donald Trump is not only the survival and fate of American democracy, of American freedom, of the rule of law, it is our self-respect as a nation. It is our self-respect as Americans. How can we respect ourselves if we act in the cowardly, subservient way that people like Vance and Rubio and Cruz are doing? But if we act in the opposite way and we speak truth, even recognizing that there are potential dangerous consequences, we maintain our self-respect as a nation. And I think a nation that has its self-respect is a nation that stands the best chance of remaining free.